I was working the check-in desk at a hotel in Amsterdam when an American couple walked up. The man pointed at the thermostat in their room photo and asked what 21 degrees meant. I said it was Celsius, about 70 Fahrenheit. He looked confused and said that made no sense because 70 is warm and 21 is freezing. I explained again, Celsius, not Fahrenheit. He insisted we fix their room temperature because he wasn't paying to freeze at 21 degrees. His wife had to pull up a conversion chart on her phone to convince him. He still didn't trust it. If you've ever traveled somewhere and realized your normal wasn't that normal, you're in the right place. Another guest that same week asked why we didn't have ice machines on every floor. I explained that Europeans don't typically use a lot of ice. She said that was impossible because how else do people drink water? I told her most people just drink it cold from the tap or fridge. She looked horrified and said warm water was unhealthy. She ended up buying bags of ice from a nearby gas station every single day of her stay. On checkout, she left a review saying our hotel was backwards for not having ice machines. My friend works at a train station in Germany. An American tourist came up asking when the 3 p.m. train to Munich was leaving. My friend said it already left because it was 3:45 p.m. The tourist said, no, the sign says 15 Uhr. My friend explained that's military time. 15 Uhr is 3 p.m. The tourist got upset and said this was Europe, not the military, and why was everything so confusing? He demanded a refund because the sign was misleading. My friend had to walk him through how 24-hour clocks work. The man missed his train arguing about it. I worked at a cafe in Paris for 2 years. One morning, an American woman ordered a coffee to go. I made her espresso in a small cup. She stared at it and asked where the rest of her coffee was. I told her that's a standard coffee here. She said she paid 4 euros for this tiny cup and wanted a real size. I explained she could order an Americano if she wanted more volume. She said she didn't want American coffee, she wanted French coffee but in a normal human-sized cup. I made her an Americano. She took one sip and said it tasted watered down and wrong. She asked for her espresso back. One time, a tourist asked me why French people were so rude for not smiling at strangers. I explained that in France, smiling at people you don't know can seem insincere or strange. She said that was the saddest thing she'd ever heard. And French people must be miserable. I told her most French people are perfectly happy, just with different social customs. She spent the rest of her coffee trying to make eye contact and smile at every customer who walked in. They all looked uncomfortable. She told me she was spreading joy. They were spreading away from her table. These stories kept coming every single day. I have a cousin who works at London Heathrow Airport. An American family came through with 8 huge suitcases. The agent told them they were over the weight limit and would need to pay extra or repack. The father said that's ridiculous because they paid for 4 people, so they should get 4 bags each. The agent explained the ticket includes 1 checked bag per person, not 2. He said in America, airlines are more generous. The agent pulled up their ticket terms. It clearly said 1 bag each. The man then tried to argue that European bags must be smaller, so actually his bags should count as 1 each because of size conversion rates. That's not how it works. They paid £600 in overweight fees. He complained the entire time that Europe was a scam. My roommate worked at a car rental place in Italy. An American customer picked up his car and came back 20 minutes later saying the car was broken. My roommate asked what was wrong. The man said the speedometer was showing he was going 90, but the car felt slow. My roommate asked if he meant kilometers per hour. The man said the dial clearly showed 90. My roommate explained that Italy uses kilometers, not miles, so 90 kph is about 55 km/h. The customer insisted that was false advertising because the numbers were misleading. He wanted a different car with normal numbers. My roommate explained every car in Italy shows kilometers. The man reluctantly kept the car, but came back the next day asking if he could put a sticker over the speedometer with mile conversions. He was serious. A friend in Sweden told me about an American guest at her hostel. He came to the front desk at 11 p.m. blasting music from his room speaker. Other guests had complained. She knocked on his door and politely asked him to turn it down because of quiet hours. He said it was barely even midnight, and quiet hours were unreasonable. She explained that in Sweden, quiet hours in residential buildings and hostels typically start at 10 p.m. He said that was insane because the night is just starting. She told him other guests were trying to sleep. He turned it down, but kept muttering about how Europe has no freedom. The next morning, he complained that people were making noise at 7 a.m. She reminded him that quiet hours end at 7 a.m. He said that's different because he was sleeping. I worked at a pharmacy in Brussels. An American tourist came in asking for Tylenol. I showed him paracetamol, which is the same thing. He squinted at it and said he didn't want European medicine, he wanted American Tylenol. I explained it's the exact same active ingredient, just a different brand name. He wasn't convinced. He said American drugs are FDA approved, and he didn't trust European regulations. I told him the European Medicines Agency has equally strict standards. He still refused and said he'd wait until he got home to take medicine. His wife was standing next to him holding her head in pain. She grabbed the paracetamol and bought it anyway. He watched her take it like she was taking poison. She was fine. Another time, a customer asked why we didn't have drive-through pharmacies. I said that's not common in Europe because most pharmacies are in city centers with narrow streets. He said that's really inconvenient because what if you're sick and don't want to get out of the car? I explained that most Europeans walk or take public transport anyway. He said that sounded exhausting. And what if it's raining? I told him people use umbrellas. He stared at me and said, America figured out a better system. Then he asked if we had a delivery option. We did. He seemed relieved. My friend worked at a post office in Portugal. An American expat came in trying to mail a package to the U.S. She asked how much it would cost. My friend told her the price based on weight. She said that seemed expensive. My friend explained international shipping costs more than domestic. The woman said, but Portugal and the U.S. both use the same mail, so why is it different? My friend tried to explain customs, international logistics, and distance. The woman cut her off and said the mail just goes on a plane anyway, so it should cost the same. She asked to speak to a manager. The manager said the same thing. She mailed the package, but left a one-star review online saying Portuguese postal workers don't understand how mail works. I was on a train in Switzerland when a tourist couple sat near me. They kept looking at their tickets confused. Finally, the woman asked me if I knew what Gleis 7 meant. I told her it means Platform 7. She thanked me and then asked why it wasn't just written in English. I said because we're in Switzerland and the sign is in German. She nodded and said that makes sense, but it's still confusing for visitors. Her husband said at least the numbers are the same. She agreed that was helpful. They seemed genuinely relieved about the numbers. Another passenger told me about flying into Frankfurt and getting confused about the airport layout. She said the signs were in German and English, but she still got lost. I asked what confused her. She said the gates were labeled with letters and numbers and she didn't understand the system. I told her that's standard in most airports worldwide, with terminals and gate numbers. She said American airports were clearer. I asked which airport she flew out of in America. She said Atlanta. I told her Atlanta literally has the same system with terminals and gates. She paused and said, yeah, but it felt more obvious there. I didn't argue. I worked at a restaurant in Copenhagen. An American family sat down and immediately asked for water. I brought them tap water. The father looked at it and asked if it was free. I said yes. He seemed suspicious and asked if it was safe to drink. I told him Denmark has some of the cleanest tap water in the world. He sniffed it and asked for bottled water instead. I brought bottled water. He complained it cost €5. I explained he could have the free tap water. He said he didn't trust it. His kids drank the tap water anyway. They were fine. He still paid for bottled. The same family asked why there was no ketchup on the table. I told them we have ketchup, but usually bring it on request. The mother said that's inconvenient, and American restaurants put it out automatically. I brought ketchup. The father then put it on his traditional Danish fish dish. The chef saw from the kitchen and looked personally hurt. After the meal, they left a 5% tip. I didn't chase them about it because I get paid a living wage. But they seemed confused why I didn't thank them more enthusiastically. My friend worked at a cafe in Vienna. An American tourist ordered a coffee and a pastry. When it came, she asked where her free refills were. My friend explained that free refills aren't a thing in Austria. The woman said that's unfair because she might want more coffee. My friend said she could order another one. The woman said she shouldn't have to pay twice for coffee. My friend explained that's how it works everywhere in Europe. The woman said Starbucks has free refills. My friend pointed out that Starbucks is an American chain, and this is a traditional Viennese cafe. The woman left a review saying the cafe was cheap for not offering refills. A different customer asked my friend why the cafe closed at 6 p.m. My friend said those are their hours. He said, but what if people want coffee at 8 p.m.? She told him there are other cafes open later. He said this specific one had the best pastries, so it should stay open. She explained the owner prefers work-life balance. He said that's lazy. She told him the owner also works the morning shift starting at 5 a.m. He didn't respond to that. I was at a dinner party in Barcelona when someone told a story about an American tourist at their restaurant. The tourist asked for the check, and when it didn't come immediately, he got impatient. He flagged down the waiter and asked what was taking so long. The waiter explained that in Spain, they don't rush diners out, so they wait until you signal you're ready. The tourist said he did signal by asking for the check 10 minutes ago. The waiter apologized and brought it. The tourist then complained the waiter seemed annoyed with him. The waiter wasn't annoyed until that moment. My cousin worked at a pub in Dublin. An American customer ordered fish and chips and then asked where the chip flavors were. My cousin asked what he meant. The man said like sour cream or barbecue. My cousin explained these are thick-cut chips, not thin American-style chips with flavors. The man said that's disappointing because he loves flavored chips. My cousin offered him vinegar and salt. He tried it and said it was too simple. He asked if they had ranch dressing. They didn't. He ate them plain while looking sad. The same pub had a tourist ask why the beer wasn't cold enough. My cousin explained that British and Irish ales are served at cellar temperature, not ice cold. The tourist said warm beer is gross. My cousin clarified it's not warm, it's cool, around 50-55 degrees Fahrenheit. The man said that's warm compared to American beer. My cousin explained that serving it slightly warmer brings out the flavor. The man said he drinks beer to get drunk, not taste things. My cousin had no response to that. The man ordered a Budweiser from the fridge instead. I knew someone who worked at a bakery in France. An American woman came in and asked if the bread was gluten-free. The baker said no, it's a traditional bakery with wheat flour. She asked if they had any gluten-free options. He said no. She seemed upset and asked how people with gluten issues eat bread in France. He told her there are specialty stores for that. She said America has gluten-free everything, and France should catch up. He told her France has been making bread the same way for centuries and isn't changing for trends. She called him rude. He shrugged. That's the most French response possible. Another American asked the same baker why the baguettes went stale so fast. He explained it's because they don't use preservatives. She said that's impractical because she can't eat a whole baguette in one day. He suggested she buy a half baguette or come back the next day. She said that's too much effort. He told her that's why French people buy fresh bread daily. She said she didn't have time for that. He suggested she shop at a supermarket for packaged bread. She bought the baguette anyway and came back the next day complaining it was hard. He told her to use it for toast. She didn't like that answer either. My friend in Italy told me about a tourist who asked why pasta was so plain. The restaurant had served cacio e pepe, a traditional Roman dish with cheese and pepper. The tourist said it needed more toppings like in America. The waiter explained that Italian pasta focuses on simple, quality ingredients. The tourist said Olive Garden has way more variety. The waiter's face froze. He walked away without responding. The kitchen staff heard about it and laughed for days. One of them said they should ban anyone who mentions Olive Garden. They didn't, but they thought about it. I studied abroad in London and lived with a host family. They invited American guests over for dinner once. The guests asked if we got American TV shows here. My host father said yes, many of them. The guest seemed surprised and said she thought the UK wouldn't have modern technology. My host father laughed and said Britain invented the World Wide Web. She didn't believe him. He pulled it up on his phone. She read it and said, well, America made it popular. He didn't argue after that. The same guest asked if we had Thanksgiving in the UK. My host mother said, no, that's an American holiday. The guest asked what we do in November then. My host mother said we just have normal November. The guest seemed confused, like she couldn't imagine November without Thanksgiving. She asked if we felt like we were missing out. My host mother said no, we have Christmas. The guest said that's not the same. My host mother agreed and moved on. My friend worked at a museum in Berlin. An American tourist asked where the World War II exhibit was. My friend directed him. Later, the tourist came back and said the exhibit was biased. My friend asked how. He said it made Germany look bad. My friend stared at him and said Germany was literally the aggressor in World War II. The tourist said, yeah, but the exhibit should be more balanced. My friend asked what balance he expected from a German museum about Germany's role in the war. The tourist didn't have an answer, but still insisted it was one-sided. My friend let him leave, thinking that. Another tourist asked my friend where the Berlin Wall currently stood. My friend explained that most of it was torn down in 1989. The tourist seemed disappointed and asked why they would destroy a historical monument. My friend explained it was a symbol of division and oppression. The tourist said yeah, but it was also history, and they should have kept it for tourism. My friend showed him the remaining preserved sections and the memorial. He took photos, but said it wasn't as impressive as he expected. He wanted the full wall. I met someone in Prague who worked at a tour company. An American tourist asked if Czechoslovakia was still a country. The guide said no, it split into Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. The tourist said that's confusing, and they should go back to one name. The guide explained both countries prefer independence. The tourist said, but it's easier for tourists to remember one country. The guide said that's not really a priority for their foreign policy. The tourist didn't understand why not. The same guide told me a different tourist asked if everyone in Prague speaks Russian. The guide said no, Czech is the main language. The tourist said, but isn't this Eastern Europe? The guide said yes, but that doesn't mean Russian. The tourist insisted most Eastern Europeans speak Russian. The guide explained that while some older people learned Russian during Soviet times, it's not the common language now. The tourist said that's surprising because movies make it seem like everyone there speaks Russian. The guide said maybe don't learn geography from movies. My professor in Scotland told us about an American exchange student who asked if Scotland was part of England. My professor said no, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, but it's a separate country from England. The student said that's confusing because they're on the same island. My professor explained that the island of Great Britain contains 3 countries: England, Scotland, and Wales. The student asked where Ireland fits. My professor said Northern Ireland is part of the UK, while the Republic of Ireland is separate. The student gave up trying to understand. My professor didn't blame him. It is genuinely confusing. Another student asked my professor if Scottish people hate Americans because of the Revolutionary War. My professor laughed and said Scotland wasn't particularly invested in that conflict, and it was over 200 years ago. The student seemed relieved. Then she asked if people in Scotland still hold grudges about Braveheart. My professor said that's a movie from the 1990s about events from the 1200s, and no, nobody cares. She said her dad told her Scottish people take history seriously. My professor said we do, but not like that. I worked at a hostel in Athens. An American guest asked if Greece invented democracy. I said yes. Ancient Athens is considered the birthplace of democracy. He said that's cool and asked if they still use the same system. I explained that modern Greece is a parliamentary republic, not a direct democracy like ancient Athens. He said that's disappointing because it would be cool if they kept it original. I told him the ancient system only allowed free male citizens to vote, so modern democracy is actually better. He said yeah, but it would still be a neat tourist attraction. I didn't know how to respond to that. Another guest asked if Greek people still worship Zeus. I said no. Greece is primarily Orthodox Christian now. She seemed surprised and said she thought they'd keep their mythology. I explained mythology and religion are different, and the ancient Greek religion died out centuries ago. She said that's sad because the myths are interesting. I agreed the myths are interesting, but worshipping Zeus isn't really practical in modern society. She said it would be more fun than regular church. I told her she's welcome to start her own Zeus worship. She laughed, but I think she considered it. That kind of gap between what we expect and what actually is, that's what I love exploring here. A different tourist asked if the Parthenon was built recently. I asked what he meant. He said it looks too good to be ancient. I explained it's been restored and preserved over time. He said so, it's not the real one. I told him it's the real structure from 447 BC, just maintained. He seemed disappointed and said he wanted to see the actual ancient version. I explained this is the actual ancient version. He said, but they cleaned it. I gave up explaining. My favorite story came from a friend in Japan. An American tourist asked her where the samurai were. She said samurai don't exist anymore. That was centuries ago. He said, but Japan is known for samurai. She explained that Japan is a modern country with technology, cities, and regular jobs. He said he knew that, but he still expected to see at least one samurai. She told him he could visit historical sites and museums. He said that's not the same as a real one. She asked what he expected. Samurai walking around Tokyo in armor. He said kind of, yeah. She told him that's not how modern Japan works. He left disappointed. She said that interaction taught her that some people visit countries expecting them to be theme parks of their stereotypes. That's the thing about these stories. They're not really about Americans being confused. They're about traveling with expectations that don't match reality. Every country has visitors who show up thinking things should work like home. Americans just happen to come from a place that's geographically isolated and culturally influential. So the gap between expectation and reality can be pretty wide. The funniest part is that most of these tourists go home and tell their friends about how weird Europe or Asia was. They don't realize they were the weird ones in that context. That's not an insult, it's just perspective. When you're in a new place, you're the outsider. The local way isn't wrong just because it's different. It's just local. I've heard thousands of these stories over the years. Some are frustrating for the people working with confused tourists. Some are hilarious. Most are just a reminder that the world is bigger and more diverse than any one country's experience. American confidence is a real thing, and it can be charming or exhausting depending on the day. But culture shock goes both ways. I'm sure plenty of Europeans visiting America have their own confused moments about free refills, sales tax not being included in prices, and tipping culture. The difference is, those stories don't go viral online because Americans aren't sitting around collecting funny European tourist stories. Maybe they should. It would balance things out. Until then, these stories will keep coming. Every day, someone somewhere is trying to explain why ice machines aren't standard in hotels, or why the date format goes day, month, year. And every day, someone else is refusing to believe it. If you've worked in tourism or service anywhere in the world, you probably have a dozen stories like this. They never stop. And honestly, they're part of what makes travel interesting. Misunderstandings, confusion, And the eventual moment when someone realizes they're not in Kansas anymore. That's the whole point of going somewhere new. If stories like this remind you how strange and wonderful the world can be, you might want to stick around.